MGTOW is a one-way road or street. You can't make a U-turn, a metaphorical one, that is. What do I mean by that? Well, what inspired me to make this video was an attempt at contacting a very old friend of mine. I've known him for 20 years, who is in the United States, who is not going his own way, but is familiar with guys like Barbarossa and, of course, my videos, and who knows the concepts, basically, that he's not going his own way. I don't talk to him very often. If I'm lucky, 2 or 3 times a year, very rarely. And he had changed his number. I found out, long story short, found he had a new number. Tried to contact him within the last month. Each time on a Sunday, because that's usually when he's free, he works a lot, and he was somehow busy or indisposed. Now, I already had suspected what was going on, but I actually managed, not this this last previous Sunday, to catch him as he was in transition. He only had about 15 minutes. He told me that he was about to head from Providence, Rhode Island, by train down to New York City. That's over 2 hours, mind you, and to visit a female friend of his. Now, that's none of my business if he wants to do that, but he does know basic concepts of going your own way. I've explained to him many times. I told him you're spending a total of over 4 hours to head down to New York City, just so you can stick your condom-wrapped dick in a vagina and then come, and then what? Now, the problem was that he was sort of in between, right? He needed to catch his train. He told me, oh, but I have 15 minutes. I told him, look, we talk maybe twice a year if we're lucky. I'd appreciate not being crammed into a schedule. I perfectly understand that if you're on a work schedule or you just don't have time because of the budget demands. He is a high lord of budgetary stymieing, but not this. He accused me of engaging in douchebaggery, and I explained to him, no, I'm not engaging in douchebaggery. I have understanding. It's none of my business at the end of the day. However, I would simply appreciate more than just 15 minutes, and then you have to run off and catch the train. So I told him, okay, but just let me know, give me a green light, send me an email if you will be free or not on this forthcoming Sunday, and I'll give you a ring. Okay. No green light was given. That is, Sunday shall be tomorrow, and so you see the pattern here. Now, I'm only using this as an example to illustrate some points I'm about to make. When I say that going your own way is a one-way path or a one-way street, I mean something very specific by that. One of the things that's implied by that, of course, is that depending on what sort of man you are and how you look at the world and try to understand it, you may or may not have different degrees of knowledge of the details of the interactions of human beings. Those of you who watch my channel know I've spent copious amounts of time studying this, and that's why I make these videos. For me, there's absolutely no turning back. But more importantly, the consequence of that, I mean, that's a given. Once you go your own way, even if you don't engage in studies of evolutionary biology or psychology, you're still, and you have the basic details down, you're not going to be going back to some conventional form of life, or at least it's very, very unlikely. But what I'm talking about here is the fallout. Now, I'm not talking about a conventional loss of friendship, as is sometimes custom. It's a different thing. It's a sort of fading away. And oftentimes, it's not malicious at all. For example, I have a friend, I presume he's still in Boston. I haven't spoken to him in over 2 years, who has Lyme disease, and very unfortunate. Former friend, I guess. He's been cohabitating with the same woman for a number of years, solely on the basis that she is the only woman who would accept an unemployed, Lyme disease-ridden man who lives off of benefits. That you got to take what you can get, supposedly. We just don't have a whole lot in common. Old conversations used to circulate around the conventional things of women and blah, blah, blah. And, well, you all know my views on that. So the friendship, or former friendship, sort of faded into the dust. And it's nothing born of malice, but, there was just no kernel that was solid enough to continue, or rather keep it going. Not the case with the High Lord of budgetary smiting, who I've known, one of my oldest friends, 20 years now. I mean, he is not going his own way, but he's watched Barbarossa videos. He's watched some of mine. He knows some of the basic concepts. And so we can talk about, we have been able to talk about it, and we have a range of other topics we can talk about. If I'm seeking specific economic knowledge, given my nescience, I will often turn to him because he really knows his stuff. He really knows it well. Or even on matters of nutrition, we tend to agree on issues of nutrition with respects to things like low carb, nutritional ketosis, etc., and the problem with sugar. And there's a wide range of topics that we can cover and talk about. And he's also intellectually inquisitive, and I've always curious, and I've always respected that. So even me going my own way has not led to a rupture in the friendship, or so I thought. Now, I'm not going to predict a total dissolution of the friendship here, and I don't think that's going to be the case. But the example me mentioning that is illustrative of a greater issue at hand is that when I say it's a one-way road or a one-way street, you literally cannot go back, and it's also a one-way street for other people. People who, for whatever reason, even people who are informed of MGTOW, such as my friend, High Lord of Budgetary Smiting, he cannot fathom my choices or my views. In fact, he asked me almost every time I talked to him, especially in the most recent 10-minute conversation I had as I caught him rushing off to the train to schlep his ass down to New York City so he can come in a condom wrapper. He said, "You're really not going to have sex anymore for the rest of your life." And this feeling, I could sense this feeling of incredulity and bemusement on his part. And I've explained to him many times, and so I would just say the same thing. I mean, this is not something I plan, but sex requires effort. Either the conventional forms of prostitution that are socially sanctioned by society, or the more formalized rituals where you just end up giving money to a woman, top that off, use economy, feel almost nothing, blah, blah, blah. Why would I subject myself to all of that? There's no point. Does that mean that categorically won't have sex? No, but it's certainly not on the horizon, and I'm not planning on it. And it's not, because I just don't, as you all know, I feel like I'm becoming a broken record, but to him, maybe he's not heard it often enough. Explaining this to him, but he still doesn't get it. And I understand him, on the other hand, far better than he understands me. And the reason is simple. Before we decided to go our own way, we all knew what it was like to be driven by these things. So hell, I used to have fuck friendships with women with a condom on, felt nothing, and just simply engaged in the motoric rituals of pumping her from behind, thinking this is something valuable, feeling almost nothing, being bored with it, and just wondering. And when I was done, because I had never come my entire life with a condom on, thinking I should have just stayed home and blown my load at home. But anyway, neither here nor there. The point I'm making is we can understand their perspective. They can't, for the most part, understand ours. And even here, with someone who understands some basic concepts, though he himself not going his own way, I can see at least the foreshadowings. It's not a prophecy of a forsaking of an old friend. I mean, I talk to this guy twice a year, and the best thing he can do on a Sunday that he is free is to schlep his ass down for a 2-hour plus train ride, and then, of course, going back up. That's over 4 hours worth of traveling, just so he can have some sex, which may or may not be good, with a 38-year-old, mind you. Now, he is 39 himself, or going on 39, but still, he earns 6 figures, he does well. He could do a lot better than that if he really wants to pursue that sort of thing, but neither here nor there. What was more alarming, of course, was the talk of cohabitation he spoke of. Now, he had cohabitated previously. It turned out to be a disaster. His ex-wife effectively left him on grounds of he didn't make enough money. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, but she needed even more money. And he said, well, maybe I'll cohabitate. I try to explain the dangers to him, etc. It all falls on deaf ears. So it's very difficult for the people who are not going their own way to understand this. Now, for me, luckily, this only applies to friends or former friends. And what has effectively become the custom is, for most people, there are I am still friends with, even though we have nothing in common as far as the mating rituals and what have you are concerned. My friendship is limited to certain topics. I'll be meeting a friend later this coming week where we'll probably talk about language and maybe some history, and that's it, because that's what our conversation is limited to. Another friend, I only talk about exercise, weightlifting, nutrition, etc., things like that. This other friend, though, is a bit unique in that I can talk about a lot of things. Others whose conversations were more limited to just normal ritualistic behavior, the friendship there is just faded completely. You remember the guy who sent me a message over Facebook about whether to not throw out my drawings and my art. I mean, that perfect example. That was eons ago, though. So they can't understand. But luckily for me, this only applies to friends. I have these days a fairly decent relationship to my parents. And my parents, in large measure, have never given a fuck about what I've done with my private life. I mean, they've met some of my ex-wives, and they don't care that I'm a bachelor or whatever. They don't nag or anything like that. That's not the case with everyone, because over the years I've received a number of messages, private messages from men who are saying, my parents are giving me issues, or my siblings are giving me issues, and what have you. That's a very different animal entirely, of course. Family is a different animal to the friendship animal, and so that is a difficult burden to carry. But I think, if anything, for those men who've sent me those messages, familial members who don't necessarily understand, they don't need to understand. They just need to accept it and get on with their own lives. There's no need for absolute understanding, particularly in the realm of family, because familial bonds, let's face it, are rarely based on a perfect understanding. They're based on, genetic relationship. Genetic relationship is not a prerequisite for intellectual comprehension or intellectual coincision. And so there's absolutely no reason why that's an absolute prerequisite. That said, I understand that to be a problem for some people, and I think the best thing you can do is ignore it. And this is not me advocating some sort of Stéphane Monnieu de fou, but you got to live your own life. I mean, I'm not saying turn your back on your family members, but if they have a problem with it, then they have a problem with it, and they'll just have to deal with it. And if they choose not to want to deal with you because of that, whatever. My parents never really have given a shit about private matters, and so it just doesn't really matter. I mean, I could be into hamsters, and they probably wouldn't care as long as I didn't make that public. The point I'm making is, it's just that was never an issue for me. It's more of an issue of basically three kinds of friends I have these days in real life as opposed to online, which I'll get in a second. The friends that just fade away because, for reasons I've explained, friends, the singular topic friends, and friends that are actually open to some of the ideas but can't or don't want to go their own way. Frankly speaking, I think my friend needs some hobbies. But we see this sort of behavior that he's so desperate to, and it's not just the sex, obviously. We all know that there's some male-mother need involved, especially if he's schlepping his ass for over 2 hours or maybe over 4 hours down in New York City. I can think of a whole lot of better things to do on a free Sunday, but neither here nor there. And there, of course, is another issue at hand. And personally, I actually regard this as the most important issue. Because of the obscure and difficult nature of friendship in real life, people you've formerly known or know, with regards to you going your own way, it's important, indeed, I believe vital, to maintain online relationships and friendships with men going their own way. Over the years, I've come to know and become friends with several people that I've met basically through my video production. Some of them include Barbarossa, Colonel Absconder, and a few others. And I think that's vitally important because we need an avenue of social intercourse. We need that intercourse because we are social creatures, and it is a good thing to be able to share ideas and talk about these ideas with people who understand well where you're coming from because they're coming from a similar bent. That's why I think it's very important to foster these relationships online. And let's face it, the MGTOW phenomenon, as far as its concern is primarily an online phenomenon. It is possible that you might be living in the same city as someone, and that if that's the case, then I suppose you could hang out or share ideas live over a beer if you're so inclined to drink that insidious liquid. But because that's very rarely the case, it's important that we maintain ties with men of like mind. I mean, obviously, I've said before, just because someone's going their own way doesn't mean I'm personally going to offer a universal endorsement of that person's ideas, whether he's a content producer or not. I have a lot of subscribers, frankly speaking, that I never would want to have a conversation with because I see what they write, the comments. It's their choice if they want to sub me, but I just, based on what I can see, what their contributions are, they're not people that I want to have social intercourse with. But besides that, it is important, and if you can find common ground with people, in fact, it's probably the most important social endeavor you can engage in, building and maintaining these online relationships and friendships, because it's entirely possible, indeed very likely, that over time your relationships and friendships in real life will wither and wane simply because, yes, MGTOW, going your own way, is a one-way road. There are no U-turns. There is no diversion. Diversion in the old original Latin sense of divertire, of a turning away from. You cannot do that. So you understand other people's perspective because you used to be a mate ritual ape as well, but now you're a different sort of ape. You are an ape going your own way, and other people aren't going to understand that because they're still caught in that loop. They are in a perpetual U-turn, as it were. They go forward and then they move back. And one thing I've often remarked to myself and to some friends, online friends of mine, is it's the oft-quoted thing that Einstein said at some point in time. He said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. Well, I think we can look at the human mating ritual as one of those definitions of insanity. Here we have the ape who has failed 15, 16 times, repeatedly engaging in the same ritual only to have the same results, with varying degrees of half-life, right? This relationship it lasted a year, the other one 4. You take a break, you suffer, you move back, and it's a bit, that is the definition of insanity to me. And when you spell it out to people, they kind of agree with you, but they can't seem to stop themselves, which is quite amusing. And the same is true of my friend, who had cohabitated with a wench. The High Lord of budgetary smiting, I was the only one back then who actually called her out. This was before I was going my own way, but very suspicious of her. I said, you got to watch out for her. Oh, no, she's a sweetie, this, that. All of a sudden, boom. I thought he had learned his lesson, but no, he had not learned his lesson. He took a break, and he's going back to the Einsteinian loop of insanity, as I like to call it. The Einsteinian ritual of insanity, mating ritual of insanity. So the point of this video is less that, I did use my friend as an illustrative point, but this video is more about fostering the need, indeed the necessity to foster these relationships and friendships online, because oftentimes we are separated by leagues of ocean or leagues of continent, and indeed I'm on friendly terms with some people in the penal colony, and I mean that's as far as you can get, and I don't have any intention of ever visiting the penal colony just because it's never satiated my curiosity or my interest, but still it's just an example of the fact that we need to maintain these relationships, because we're unlikely to find either support or understanding in the conventional real life people that we've come to know. And for those of you who have family members who don't understand, I think it's even more important that you maintain relationships and friendships online with men going their own way, to the extent that you can build them, because that's where you will have a sense of understanding. And it is somewhat distant, admittedly, but it's a lot better than sitting there twiddling your thumbs with the scrutinizing gaze of your genetic relations looking at you in odd and funny ways, I would think. Anyway, so MGTOW, definitely going your own way, one-way road, no U-turns, no diversion, and yet for most people they are stuck in their perpetual Einsteinian loop of insanity. Let them keep on doing it. And if they truly don't understand and you have nothing in common, let them go. That's unfortunate. There's no malice in it. I have myself not given up on my friend yet, but we'll see. I'm pretty sure, as is custom, that his current pseudo relationship will end up in the gutter, and I will end up once again in a position where I can say, I told you so. He will listen, recover, and rinse and repeat. He is, after all, insane by the Einsteinian standards of the loop. As always, gentlemen, thanks for watching. Enjoy your weekend. It's snowing here, and if you like snow, then enjoy the snow if it's snowing where you are. I think instead of Zeus, we should be thanking Thor, snow, weather. So, Thor be praised. Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.